Hi, Charlie. This is Lachlan here. Good afternoon. Just thought I'd make sure that you're okay. Can we see your screen? Yes. Do you want to just say a couple of words so I'll make sure that sounds and
Yeah,
video is
just
good?
to say, good afternoon.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to literally give it another 53 seconds. No, it's not. We're going to give it another 10 seconds and then we'll start. So just wait for a couple more people to arrive. So we're starting in 3, 2, 1. So good afternoon and welcome to our Cyber Scotland Week webinar. Today's webinar is called To Pay or Not to Pay? That is a question after a ransomware cyber incident. If you'd like to ask Charlie any questions during the webinar, please do so by typing in the question box on the control panel to the right of the screen, and we will put these through to Charlie at the end of the session. The webinar will last a maximum of an hour, and you'll get a recording of the webinar a couple of hours after it is finished in case you missed any of the session or would like to share the webinar with any of your colleagues. We'll also upload the recording to our website in due course. So I think if we're ready to begin, I will hand you over to Charlie. So Charlie, you have control. Go.
Good afternoon, Charlie McLean Bristol, and I'm doing this webinar to do. The reason why I wanted to do this webinar is it always seems to be in cyber incidents at the moment. It's always the $1 million question. Could even be $1 million question. Do you pay a ransomware and do you not pay a ransom? And normally when you ask the question, the automatic reply is, of course, I wouldn't I wouldn't pay a ransom. But as we'll find out today, A, quite a lot of people are doing it, and B, the question is more nuanced than you think. So in often it's not just a simple question. So what I want to do with today's webinar is really give you some thoughts, give you some context, give you some background, and hopefully then you can go back to your own organizations and you can ask the question, because I don't think you want to know you're in the middle of the ransomware event and you get your crisis team or your board together and you're busy deciding, well, are we going to pay? Are we not going to pay? Do we have the authority to pay? Can we, what is the consequences of paying? Like all good business continuity, crisis management, cyber incident management, you should think about these things in advance. So this is an opportunity for you to get a bit of the background and a bit of a kind of put this in context. But in the end, it is very much going to be down to you and your organization. And it'll be interesting to see whether I change your mind either way of whether you should pay or not. So that's me, just in case you're wondering. My background is Army, worked for Angling Water for 8 years doing emergency planning, did business continuity for Scottish Power, and then my day job is basically working with Plan B Consulting, and I also work with Lachlan there on a business continuity training. So that's my main job. Fellow of the Emergency Planning Society. I'm busy working on a new version of the Good Practice Guidelines with a whole load of others. I'm busy, I'm a global expert working on ISO 22361, so I'm helping write the new crisis management standard. I've written a nice book available from all good booksellers, including Amazon, on business continuity exercises. And quite a lot of the course today is based upon a training course that BCT, who's the other person in this webinar, is based on their 2-day, and it's called it's a certificate in cyber incident management, so you get an exam. The course is 2 days, and it's really all about how do you manage a cyber incident. You know, we're working on the premise here that to say, however good your cyber defenses are, if a nation state with enough time and effort want to get through your systems, they can, or pretty much can. So we work and say, if anyone can be hacked, you need to be prepared for it. And so that 2-day course is how you prepare for those incidents. And the course is certified by the National Cybersecurity Center, so by GCHQ. And I'm a certified trainer. I'm business continuity training, a certified providers of the training. So that's me. But just to say, you can see from my background, I'm not a technical person. So endpoint protection, all that magic that IT people do is not me. So it's purely on the sort of crisis management, incident management, which I come from. So what we're going to do, I'm going to just talk about what a ransomware attack is and what it isn't, and what is the latest kind of versions of ransomware attacks. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about if you're thinking to ask the question to pay or not to pay, what are considerations? What do you need to think about? I'm then going to answer the question, should you pay or should you not pay? And then if you do decide to pay, I'm going to give you some thoughts on what are some of the issues with paying, what are some of the things you can do if you decide to pay. So that's our agenda for the next sort of 45 minutes or so. If you have a ransomware attack, for us, there is a number of elements. So these are the sort of main elements, one of which is to pay or not to pay. So that's a key question. And actually, if we talk about the elements, then actually this pay or pay not to pay impact or the consequences of doing that is going to affect everything else. So if we come round here, the first thing is we need to do when we're doing a ransomware response is about our reputational management. We've been hacked, so our secrets might be all over the dark web. They might be available there. We might not be able to provide service to our customers. If you look at Toyota yesterday, I think it was, had one of their supply chain hacked, and they won't be able to produce 13,000 cars, I think I saw. So there is the reputational management element of managing a cyber incident. One of the things is if you pay, you might get your incident over quicker, resolve it quicker. So there's less incident management to be managed. And I think we also have to take into account then, if we think about the earliest ransomware attacks, say TalkTalk, that's the one everyone remember. Nowadays, there are so many ransomware attacks that it's hard to kind of even differentiate one. If I know the Scottish Cyber Week, so there's the SEPA one seemed to be the main one that resonates with Scottish. You know, that's the one we've heard of, and also resonates with the Scottish public sector. But if you look at lots of university, there's a multitude of other companies being hacked. So there's an element of reputational management. Of course, there is always a technical response and recovery. So you've basically got to chase out the bad guys out of your system. You've got to patch it. You've got to stop them. You've got to patch the bit where they got in. And then you need to recover your systems. So there's a big element of technical response. Now, when I started talking about this course or talking our 2-day course a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of people were still saying cyber's technical issues, get the techies in, they'll sort it, and crisis team, just give us a ring when you've sorted it. I think enlightened boards, enlightened managers are now working out to say that actually, of course, it is about it is about technical response, but it also is an awful lot about reputation, continuity of operations, and statutory reporting. So we move on to continuity of operations. If all your systems are locked out, then how do you continue on your business? You know, if they look at the Irish healthcare hack, they managed to get back, their basically whole healthcare system was paralyzed, and they were lucky that maybe the hackers had a level of conscience and gave them the keys, so they managed to start to encrypt their files. But if you have no IT, your operations are going to come to a grinding halt very quickly. And for many organizations, not all, there is not manual workarounds. So if you don't have any IT, you don't do any business, or your business may be delivered over IT. Of course, if you're something like social services, you can still go out and, you know, do those physical jobs, but even still, you're not quite who's on shift. You can't remember if you get different people do different shifts at different times. All that information is electronic. And then we mustn't forget our statutory reporting. So we've got to do our ISO, Information Commissioner's offices within 72 hours. So we've got to do that reporting. And as part of that reporting, we need to inform those whose data has been lost. And for those of you who have a lot of data, that can be a very big job. So that is some of the issues associated with ransomware. When we're talking about pay or not to pay, we're really talking about well, we're not talking about untargeted ransomware. So WannaCry, which was the famous one, affected the NHS. Although there was a ransom element there, the ransom was $300. And even if you paid the $300, the ransomware wasn't actually set up for people to pay. So even they paid it, actually there wasn't a key at the end. And the gay where this is a non-Petra, which affect Maersk and affect DLA Piper, and it caused £10 billion worth of damage. Again, I can't remember where this one was a ransomware, but the ransomware was minor, and that was, if you read the book I read, was a Russian attempt to disrupt Ukraine. And they find out that it actually was a little bit more successful than they thought. And this software got out went around the world and encrypted all sorts of organizations, not particularly the target, which was Maersk, was one of the big ones. This is DLA Piper, the lawyers. So it ransomwared all their files, but these were collateral damage. They weren't aimed at these organizations. So those type of ransomware is not really what we're talking about, the $300. What we're talking about is the targeted attacks. So these are where they are busy trying to target a company and extort them for money. So we know that with SEPA, they didn't pay, but they attacked SEPA. I think some of you will have seen that University of Highlands and Islands there. That's the famous one in America with the Colonial Pipeline. And so America started, or the East Coast started running out of fuel. The important thing to note on that one is, and it did happen in WannaCry too, that the main effect was them closing down their systems and cutting off and shutting down their pipeline. The ransomware didn't actually get their pipeline, their SCADA systems, the process control there. It only affected their back office systems, but they closed them down anyway. And I have seen there is a bit of a push to say, actually, are you better off keeping your systems up and trying to get rid of the ransom that way than closing everything down? Because if you close everything down, you actually achieve the same effect as what the bad guys want to do. So that's the famous one in America. Saudi Aramco is a little bit more interesting. They had 2000 and something. They had really, and they were basically all their IT systems down for about 7 or 8 months. But there was a more recent one where a contractor took data from them and then tried to ransom it for $50 million. So don't forget the internal threat. Lots and lots of schools have been affected. Lots and lots of local authority. Hackney, I'm not sure whether you can now, but Hackney weren't able to do any conveyancing because all the conveyances information was locked out. So that had then a big knock-on effect to their A, making money as a council, and B, the public, because the public can sell their house. These are just one of the ones I picked up last week was Ransomware. That's the big meat producer in America which paid a ransom. We'll come on to that. This is a little bit interesting. I don't know if any of you are video gamers, but you can watch live video gaming here. And the bad guys there managed to steal their entire source code. So once you've lost your source code, anyone can take that code and recreate your website, because that is how you recreate your website from your source code. And the bad guys were meant to have stolen their, I think, 6 terabytes of data. So how poor are their systems that nobody noticed 6 terabytes of data going out of the way? And the guys who did this are looking to release that data. But the problem for Twitch is to say someone could then start Twitch too, and all right, they haven't got maybe the content, but they've got, you know, probably the tens of millions of dollars work to produce that website. That's all available to a third party. So on targeted, what we're talking about is targeted attacks on specific organizations, either chosen for because they seem to have money, or chosen because they got a vulnerability, but it's not random, they're particularly chosen. This is what the typical attack does, and it's called a triple or double extortion. So basically what they do is they gain access to your site, and they gain access to your site is phishing, clicking on the links there, which are all told not to do it. Spear phishing. So, you know, dear Charlie, I like my rugby, Glasgow rugby. So actually, dear Charlie, have a look at this picture of, I can't even think of any Glasgow players now, so not that much into rugby. Come and click on the picture of Glasgow rugby players. And oh yeah, I'll click on that picture, and there's a nice picture of Glasgow rugby player, but at the same time, it's going to be malware. But they've seen from my Facebook profile, or they've seen from my Instagram, that I go to the rugby, I'm interested in rugby, so they've targeted me because they want to get into our company. And then, you know, and they can social engineer. So that's really sort of social engineering, but use spear phishing because it's targeted to me. So they gain access to your system. The next thing they're doing is they're identifying your valuable data. So what they want to do is, in the data, they want the juicy stuff. They want the stuff that you don't want out there. Now, that is a really useful statistic for all of us. So when you look at the CIPA hack, they never mentioned they lost any data. Only much later did they lose any data. But if you know they've been properly done for extortion ransomware, you can almost tell, because it's 84%, they were lost data. So you could have almost day 2 said to CIPA, if you could contact them, have you lost data? And actually, eventually, they had to admit their lost data because there was the Times did an article on it, and they had to admit they had lost data there. So if you see one of these attacks, maybe it's on a rival, someone you do work with, and they have your data, then you can pretty much be assured that their data will have gone. If you look at CIPA, I think they lost 6 gigabytes of data, but what the guys did extract was the stuff they thought was the most interesting. So your data extraction is done by professionals, so they know what they're looking for. They identify this, I think it's a horrible word, but they identify this idea of what their crown jewels are. So what are the most important things that you as an organization will have. They'll extract them and they'll take them out. And on the whole, they know how you've got AI systems. They know how to get around all the fancy, all the fancy controls you can put on. I suspect the fancier the controls, the more money on you spend, it less likely they're to attack you, because they can go and attack somebody who has spent less money on IT, but they're quite good at getting this stuff out. As they are extracting the data, so I can't quite find the figures, maybe someone can tell me. It was about 2015, the average time that someone had been in your system was 200 days, average. I don't know what it is now. I suspect it's shorter, but they will still be in your system. They could have been in there for weeks, if not months. So they have the good opportunity to identify the valuable data. They will then encrypt your files and prepare your files for encrypted, and at the last minute, encrypt them off. Lock out all your files, any files they can get to, and I hear this sort of, it's in the cloud. It doesn't actually matter when it's in the cloud in your own data center. It's about whether they can get access to it. So if they can get access to your data, they get access to your data in the cloud, they lock them out as far as they can. And they know the more they lock out, the more you are likely to pay. And also, if you think about software as a service, what they can do is lock out your means of logging on your Active Directory, so that even if you have software as a service, they're not necessarily, that data may be difficult for them to get, because that's actually stored by 365, or it's stored by Salesforce, or it's stored by Aggresso, or whatever the systems you use. If you can't physically get access to your system and log on to your system won't let you get onto these systems. So the data may be fine, but if you can't get access to it, you're locked out of your systems. Well, it's the same effect. And most companies, it seems to me, don't actually allow people go straight through a browser into Salesforce. They do it through their own Active Directory there. And it's often done at the most inconvenient time. So as soon as I saw SEPA's hack on Christmas Eve, you knew that that wasn't a chance time, because they do it at the most inconvenient time. Because, on Christmas Eve or New Year, do we put our top IT guys on standby? No, we put the junior guys on it. I've been here 10 years. It's your turn. You're doing Christmas. You guys do Christmas. I'm not doing that. I'm one of the old timers here. So they do it at the most inconvenient time, because they want to put pressure on you. And if you haven't got your A team, if you can't find you've got limited access to your people, you can't find the big decision makers, then that puts pressure on you. So they ask you for a ransom, and they ask you your keys to the encrypted files to get your encrypted files back. We'll talk about that in a bit. They'll try and extort you for not releasing the data. So actually, they're going to release all your data. And if you look at SEPA, there was a release of data, and it was all the top 10 polluters in Scotland. So they released the data, made the data available. I think it was the Conti gang who did that. And then someone managed to compile top 10 polluters from that data released. So that is the kind of thing that somebody took, because they thought that was actually what they could extort them for. So you release the data. And also what they can do, if you've lost the data, but maybe this data pertains to a third party because you're a lawyer perhaps, then they could go after the lawyers and say, they're not paying, but do you want your data, which I've got, which this other organization had, do you want to pay not to release your data? So that's the triple extortion bit. So that is your typical what is happening to people. And if you will find that companies woken up this morning and that is what's happened to them. So that's the kind of bit about ransomware. So that's what we're dealing with. I just thought this was interesting here. It's just how they get in. So this is the compromise of people are getting in mainly here on if you reuse your passwords, so using your private life to say ones at work, because you can never remember passwords, and those passwords are lost or leaked, especially in a commercial and a private site, or you kind of put something in an internet site you think is good and you think, oh, I didn't actually get anything from that, but you use the same password, then the bad guys are harvesting passwords, and there's a marketing usernames and passwords. So they're getting in that way, they're getting in through mail phishing, and then people are the lookout for zero-day exploits and looking into software vulnerability and some other ways as well. So that's how they're getting in the first place. And often the ransomware organizations have professional people whose job it is to get you into systems. So that's how they're getting in. This is interesting, is 82% of British firms who've been victims of ransomware attack paid the attackers. So in Britain, we're paying a lot of it. So if you met a few companies be ransomware, the majority of them, even if they won't admit to it, is paying, and that's BBC. I always think you have to take kind of like statistics in cyber with a bit of a pinch of salt, because the fact is that sometimes they're not always, it depends on the quality and how much money they want to spend on the research. So sometimes there's a bit of a survey like the Business Continuity Institute does, which is only as valid as those who bother to fill in the survey. But BBC is saying 82% British firms victim ransomware pay, and the global average is 58. So if you do pay, you're amongst others. These are who've paid and the ones most people don't like to admit to this stuff. And so it comes out very slowly. So University of California, you can see that. Travelex, they were done on New Year, a couple of New Years ago. I know that they exist and were sold for £1 a year and a half later. And I think their demise was not helped by the poorly managed ransomware. Colonial Pipeline, they managed to get quite a lot of that money back because FBI managed to hack the hackers and get quite a lot of their money back, but I wouldn't rely on FBI coming to your rescue. This is what quite a lot of money is being done by American local authorities, so they're paying. That's one of the really big ones. $11 million. And some of these big companies, $1 billion, 2-3 billion turnover companies, so actually £11 million is, in the grand scheme of things, it's painful, but it's not unaffordable. And you can see Garmin got hacked as well, and they're 10 million. So that's quite a big payment. So that gives you some idea of what the payments are. Average ransom demand rate of pay holders. So this is from a cyber insurance company, so they should know, was 1.12 million. And it is and the money has been going up. So why do 100,000, a couple of £100,000 when you get 1.5 million? And if lots of people are paying, why not get that? And that is the kind of, there's been a slight downturn in ransom, but you can see roughly that that's round about the amount there. So some will be more, some will be less. The cost of not paying. I'm asking one of my questions here. In cost benefit, you are probably always cheaper paying, with a caveat. But this is one of the Copeland Council. I can't remember how much their demand was, but you look at it, cost them 2 million. Now I know the turnover of that council is only 9.5 million, So, you know, they spend almost 20% of their budget on IT trying to recover from a ransomware attack. So that's quite a lot of their budget. Here's some ones. I just picked up these ones from America. So, you know, ransom of 50,000 quid. Notice the date. So that's a while ago. They spent £2 million on PR digital forensic consultants. You know, digital forensic people are not cheap, and you know, consulting and all the rest of it. And then you can see Baltimore, 76,000 and cost them over $108 million. Now you can see the impact there. Sometimes I think these things are quite difficult to calculate because people calculate in different ways, but you can see here that on the whole, these things are very expensive. And one of the main reason they're expensive is because one of the ways you get out of them is rebuilding your IT. And if you have to rebuild your IT from scratch, you need to go and rebuy all the servers again. And you think, well, why don't we just wipe down our servers and that'll be much cheaper because we can take them back to their operating system, and then we can rebuild them back up that way. And the problem you end up with that, and I'm getting off my non-technical bit, is the operating system that operates the server. There's nothing stopping the bad guys of actually keeping the code in there. So it actually, when you rebuild it again, the back doors or the malware is still inside the system, and you get back with the reinfection, you're back to where you started with. So if you really want to do that, you need to go back to, you need to buy new servers, and you need to basically rebuild your IT. And that's expensive. IT, buying it the first time is expensive, and then you had to buy it again. It's even more expensive. This is, I think, a useful one to, this is, I suppose, against paying. Now, this is from Sophos, so you would kind of trust them that they should know what they're doing. So only 8% recovered all of their data after paying a ransom. 30% recovered no more half their data, and 65 was the average amount of data. Some received less than that, some received more than that. So I think you have to be beware of that. If you're doing your calculations, you're not guaranteed to get all your data back. Now, big cyber, hackers rely on their reputation, so they're not going to get you to pay and then release your data anyway, because if they did that anyway, everyone would know. And actually, would anyone pay? Because you say, what's the point of paying? Because you're going to release my data. So their business model only works if they keep their word. So in that one, even they keep their word and don't release your data, you're still going to lose some data. We'll talk about backups in a second. So, you're going to, that's the issue. But if you're worried about the release of the ransomware, that you're not necessarily going to get all your data back again. So you just need to be aware of that. In terms of backups, basically, as we've seen from the triple extortion ransomware, as well as going for your data, they go for your backups. So anyone who's been clever and got high availability backups, so they back up every 15 minutes, back up every 5 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever, and they take that offline, they keep their backups online. The bad guys know that, and so they get your backups. So you have to think through. So it's not just about the old RTO, which, if you've done business continuity, and love, if how much data you need to lose. There's a different calculation here, because with an RTO, with a, with a really good backup system, you shouldn't have to lose very much data. But if the bad guys can get your backup systems, you might then back up to tape once a month, and then you're rolling it back to RTO at a RPO at the worst case once a month. So your backups are absolutely critical in being able to recover from ransomware. And you have to think more about how availability and other bad guys are going to get your data backup is. Now this starts to get off my area of expertise. So what technologies and what style of backups do you need to do to make sure that these guys don't get your backups? So backups are absolutely critical. So let's come on to the million-dollar question, pay or not to pay. And I think there's three dimensions here. There's a first dimension you have to take into account is it's a moral issue. Seeper's line I thought was brilliant to say we do not spend taxpayers' money on paying off cyber criminals. Great. And actually paying off extortionists is not good in anyone's bit. And we all know the more you pay off extortioners, the more they come back. They might not come back to you, but they'll come back to your next door neighbor. Whereas if you say no, then they'll try with the next person. If they say no, then they've got no business and they'll have to think of something else there. So there is a moral issue on that, and it depends really on your morals. Also, maybe it depends on your company or your organization's values. There's the Norsk Hydro is an aluminium smelter, which has held out one of the people who managed a cyber incident well. They said it is not in our values to pay a ransom. They said that almost hour one, and that was their decision. Boom. Cost them £60 million to recover, but they said not in our values to pay a ransom. We'll never pay a ransom. We'll take whatever pain it is to get recover. There is a flip side to the moral bit to say, actually, if you're an organization of 5,000 staff and you had a ransomware attack and the ransomware was really good and really well executed, so that every single bit of your data was locked out, and there was and with mainly if people lock it out properly, which normally happens, there is pretty much no way of getting back. So don't trust anyone who says, oh yeah, I can get it, I always get it back. The only way these people, if they say they can always get it back, is what they do is to pay off the extortionists themselves and get the key. So if there is no way of getting that data back apart from paying, then is it a moral issue that 5,000 people lose their jobs and lose their livelihood, and this company that somebody's built up or organizations someone's built up, they're not able to deliver their services, and could have a huge impact on the local economy, on people. You know, if you think about the Irish healthcare, they were lucky to get the key, but if the extortioner said, no, you're not, you know, we're not going to give you the key, and then people start to die because they've got no healthcare records, then where do we lie with the moral issue there? Again, with SEPA, I did speak to their senior manager, is Terry, who's just gone, and I said, did Scottish Government put pressure on you not to pay? And he said, no, the decision was mine, but I can pretty much think with most government organizations, they kind of know not to pay. And you know, I think it's a brave chief executive who just goes ahead and pays, and especially with the CP1 just for the Scottish election. So you know, you can't see the Scottish government just for election being really keen to pay off extortionists. So there is something you have to take the moral issue in there. There is a financial issue here as well. You know, like that, was it Baltimore or one of those American things? £76,000 ransom, £18 million cost. Now maybe, you know, maybe it's taxpayers' money. Just go, well, it's taxpayers' money. but maybe your organization can't afford the cost of rebuilding all your IT. Maybe you haven't got cyber insurance. You can't afford that cost. And, the cheapest way is to pay. So there's a financial calculation in terms of cost benefit, of which to me it's normally cheaper to pay. But if you can pay the ransom and, it's painful, but it's not that painful, you can pay, or if you can afford the backups and the rebuilds and all the rest of it. So there's a financial calculation you need to work that through and say, what's it going to cost us and can we afford it? There is also the third element of backups. If your backups are being got and your possibility of losing all your data, which pretty much seems to have happened to SEPA, then, can you exist as a business? Is your business viable or do you have to pay? So I think in terms of backups, you really, first of all, you need to do the work now to make sure that are your backups in the place you want to be, but you need to do this calculation on the day and say, if we lose a month's worth of data, because that's the last backup we're going to do, and we're going to rebuild the system, can we cope with that or can we not? And that should really be a calculation you should do now, and either say, well, we can cope with the month and we back it up every month, so we're happy with that, or we can't cope with that, we got to back up every 24 hours because that's the amount of data we can lose, or we can't afford to lose data, we'll be out of business, so we need to do something different. So your backup is the third element of that calculation. I think you ought to rehearse it with your senior managers. You might want to come up with a predetermined decision. I think, even if you come up with a predetermined decision, I think to be realistic, you ought to say in 90, 95%, 99% of cases, we would say not pay, but we have to take into account if something is so devastating, is so bad, we might have to pay. Maybe you just say we're never going to pay. Maybe we just say it's the cost of business. We'll just pay and we'll get on with it because that's the way we do it. So that is the way I see the calculation, and it is, only the aftermath will only ever be able to tell you whether you got it right or wrong. So, but I think you should rehearse it and think it through and look at the nuances and the information for your organization. Those are some of the industry. So you can see some things going up in industrials, going up in healthcare, going up in financial services, materials, non-profit a bit down there, professional services a bit up, real estate. So, you can look at the industries there. Just before we go on to payment, I like that quote. I thought that was good to share with you. And I do think, sometimes when we're doing cyber exercises, cyber talks, we get into debates with, IT. Well, that wouldn't happen. We got AI stuff. We got, it would sniff out this thing at 1,000 yards. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But, I think the person who doesn't agree that their defenses can be overwhelmed is the person who's at least enlightened enough to understand that enough time and effort you can get in there. And this is the last one on payments. So the first of all, just if you get a payment, they've done their homework, so they will put the ransom set at an amount which is suitable for your organization. So I know that one ransomware in a Scottish context, the amount of ransom was exactly the same as what they had in their bank account. So the guy's done their homework and said we can afford that because you can got that in your bank account, spare cash in your bank account. So they're not going to go to you who turn over $2 million or I've got $2 million budget and say I want $1 billion off you because you're never going to pay. So the payment is affordable. You have to know you can speak to the hackers. They have help desks. They have reputations. They even have sometimes these kind of rate us for our customer service 3 out of 10 or whatever. So you can speak to them. And often some of the ransomware screens I was saying, you can go in the dark web, use your Tor browser and go and speak to them. So, you know, you can negotiate with them. They're not kind of anonymous people. They will contact you. And if they don't think, let's put pressure on them, if they don't think you're taking you seriously, they might ring you up. They might send you emails to just, you know, put pressure on you. You can negotiate the amount. And these are a couple of companies that are professional ransomware negotiators. So there's such a thing. I don't know if the guys when they were at school kind of says, what do you want to be when you grow up, little Johnny or little Jenny? I want to be a professional ransomware negotiator. But you can negotiate them out. And one of the tactics you can do is to say, actually, you just go with the amount and say, well, we can't afford that. Do your worst because we can't afford that. But, you know, we can't afford £1 million. You know, we just can't get our hands on that sort of cash. We're COVID, you know, all the rest of it. But, you know, or we can get that ourselves on that cash, but it's going to take 6 weeks because we've got to liquidate that and we've got to do that. But, you know, we get 100,000 quid. Do you want to take 100,000 quid now, or do you want to wait for the you know, £1 million later? And I've had this for a couple of negotiators who say, look, you can often get the money later down, and they're happier to take £100,000 now because you'll pay that tomorrow than wait for the big price in 3 or 4 weeks' time when they could have been got. They could have got, you know, law enforcement might have got them, or they can move on to somebody else. So you can negotiate the amount. This was an interesting one, is because you can speak to hackers, sometimes they're how the path to where they do the customer service is known by other people. And sometimes people can go onto that and join in your negotiations. And this has happened a number of times, and try and either be helpful or say, oh, that's not enough, or just kind of interfere with it. So one of the things you should do, according to these negotiators, is set up an independent way of speaking to hackers so that nobody else can get in there, which is a bit bizarre. I never thought. Professional ransomware. So this was a guy, Mike, who I spoke to, did an interview work. He works, I think, Group Sense there. One of the other things that he said to me, and I've read this a couple of times, to say, you've not got to get emotionally involved in this. It's a business transaction. It's not personal. It's just a business for them. So don't swear at them. Don't rant and rave. Treat them with respect, because you have something they want, they have something you want, and you want to try and come out to some sort of win-win position as far as you can win-win in this. So it's a business transaction, don't personal. So it happens to you, keep calm and try and carry on. They do it at worst time. So they'll do it on New Year's Day. They'll do it in the time to put you off balance. A negotiation will go over hours and days. This is not like some Latin American kidnap, which you've probably seen the films in the 70s, where they kind of negotiated, you know, he's been in captivity for 3 years or 6 months or whatever. They want paid. You know, it's hours and days. If you're not going to pay, you're bugging about. They'll just release your data, leave your stuff locked, and let you get on with it and go on with the next victim. So, you know, this is a short time. This is not days. Just in terms of prosecuted for payment, it is not a crime to pay off extortion people in the UK. The only crime it is with this is to pay off known terrorist organizations or people on official sanctions lists. Those are the two things you can be done for, but you can't be prosecuted for paying somebody. You know, it's not illegal to pay for ransom in the UK. Some people, if you've got insurance might pay. Some people also use their computer. You know, if they got a support company, a third party support company, they get them to pay. You know, we don't pay off hackers. Yeah, you haven't, but your you know, your IT response company has just put in a bill for $6 million, and they haven't done $6 million worth of work, and it's basically they use the people to pay off the company. So they say, well, we didn't pay. So you can't be prosecuted for payment. And the last bit just on this is the sort of hints and tips is that you can ask them to decrypt some of your data so you can actually prove that the key works. But you're going to get what 65% give or take back if you pay for the key. So you can actually ask them to test some data, decrypt it to prove that they actually have the keys. So that is what I've got. I hope you find that useful within the time. So is there any questions? All right, let's have a look at that. Hussein, right. Heard about attack where the users asked to pay 30. That's a sort of different type. That's Jan from Jane. It's a different sort of cyber attack. There's lots of others. We can spend all day on it. Other cyber hacks and scams and things. But the things we're talking about sort of serious amounts of money. So that's sort of, Jane, I think that's something slightly different you're talking about. I don't, that probably goes on. Is it legal? In the UK, it's not. I think in America, it's not. I'm not sure in Europe whether it is illegal or not. You have to check, and this is one of the things, part of your due diligence and part of your preparation. And you need to go and ask the lawyers, because one of the things you want to know is what are the reporting requirements. It's not illegal in the UK. I'll still get lawyer, didn't say Charlie said. But we need to report to the ICO. But if you had an Uzbekistan subsidiary and they were hacked, what is the law in Uzbekistan? Well, I don't know. They're actually getting a new data protection law, so I do know a little bit about that. So, you need to check in all the jurisdictions what the laws are. So you need to do the laws. Companies that choose to pay, do they have backup solutions with ransomware protection, or just I think most people have backups, but a lot of people's backups can be got. So history, as far as I didn't relate whether they had to pay because they had backups, or whether they just couldn't face, they just wanted this thing to go away. And if they paid, they could move on in 2 or 3 days, rather than, we looked at Hackney, spent a year trying to recover. We look at SEPA, they're still not recovered, as far as I understand, still not recovered. So you're taking down your operations for a year. So, gain and going cost benefit. I'm not working for the ransomware people, but, your backups you have to take into account. Can you comment on risk mitigation measures regarding criticism? Well, this is where I think, this is where you have to go and have this conversation with your seniors and say, do they understand that you're going to rebuild from scratch? Do they understand how quickly you're going to get that? Do they understand the impact on the organization? And then are they spending enough money on information security? Or are they skimping and saving on this because, skimp and save, that looks really expensive, I'll buy the cheaper software. But the consequences are fairly high, but there's no such thing as 100% security. So I think you have to look at your own organization, what your risks are, what your vulnerabilities are, but you had to spend the money because the consequences are fairly large. Do you identify small dinners to pay ransom more than larger organizations? I don't know about that one. It's a really good question. I suspect it's
Sorry,
probably
Charlie.
because
Can we just? I'm just going to read out the question again because I think it was a very interesting one, and maybe people didn't hear it. Do you tend to find small businesses tend to pay the ransom more so than larger organizations? That is a question.
That is the question, and the answer is I don't know. I think probably if you looked into some of the statistics there, you might find that. But I think, maybe they're not collected because a lot of the sophos and the people interested in, they're interested in these surveys to scare large organizations, not small organizations. So I don't know. I suspect it's somewhat the same as it's the same calculations, but at 84% are paying, that must include small organizations. So probably, yes, they tend to pay too. I think that's all the questions I have. There's some good questions there.
Okay,
Any
great.
other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say if there's any other questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. We've got a couple of minutes to go. So unless we've got any other questions, I will say.
Can I just do a plug for our quick courses then? So we have a 2-day certified cyber incident management course. Anyone's welcome to come along, available as an in-house course or available as public course. We do that every month, every 6 weeks or so. There's just a new course that we do, which we're just starting, called Crisis Communications and PR After Cyber Incidents. So really focusing on, for in-house comms people, the training, what to do, how to respond, some of the lessons learned from some of the case studies we've looked at. We've also do cyber exercises of all sorts, cyber training for senior managers, cyber awareness for staff, and also cyber playbooks, so how to respond at the senior level. And last but not least, we do cyber gap analysis. So all those things are available if you'd like to have further conversations on these things.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. No, that was good. Great session. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we did in the office. It's always interesting to listen to webinars on things that are very, very relevant at the minute. And I think all of us in any organization can imagine what kind of impact a cyber attack could have on us and how much we'd be prepared to pay. I like the one that said they were asked to pay £3.19. Which seems like an acceptable amount of money. I'd probably be prepared to pay. And thank you to everyone who attended and asked questions. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be emailing a recording of the webinar in a couple of hours' time, and this will be sent directly to you from GoToWebinar. All the recordings of our previous webinars are available to view on the website as well. If you have any feedback on this webinar or any topics you'd like to be covered in future webinars, please just reply to any of the emails you've received from us. And a survey will be emailed out to you shortly, and we'd appreciate it if you could fill it in. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.